Welcome to our classroom. In this space, we talk about education, which is inclusive of, but not limited to, what happens in schools. Education is taking place whenever and wherever we are willing to learn. I am your host, Roberto Germán, and our classroom is officially in session. Welcome to our classroom. I'm here with Traci Huahn, who writes books for kids and especially love stories rooted in Asian American culture, history, and identity. So we got a treat for you today. We're going to be talking about her debut book coming out soon, Mamie Tape Fights to Go to School, her debut picture book based on a real story, folks. This is a treat for you. I've already read the book, all right, so I'm ahead of the game. But we're going to loop y'all in. Y'all got to grab a copy because we have to amplify these stories. And as a former attorney and the daughter of Chinese immigrants, Traci feels a deep connection to Mamie's story and hopes it will inspire young readers to become changemakers, even if it starts by taking one small step. I'm not a young reader, but I am a reader, and I feel inspired by this book. It didn't end the way I thought it would end, I'm not gonna lie, but I have a great appreciation for authentic stories. Because when I go to a movie and it has a picture perfect ending, I'm like, that's not real life. And so I got to the end of the book and I was like, let me not give it away. I'm gonna pause. That was just a hook for y'all. That's a hook for y'all. You got to read it on your own. Traci, welcome to our classroom.
Thank you so much, Roberto. I'm so happy to be here, and I really applaud the work you guys are doing, Multicultural Classroom, and it's really a great honor to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and jump into this, talk about your debut picture book, Mamie Tape Fights to Go to School, which is based on a true story. But who is it written for?
So it's really written for young kids, for children ages 4 to 8, but I do hope that it's also a book for everyone. I really hope kids of all ages and the adults that are in their lives, whether that's teachers or librarians, the parents, the caregivers, anybody, that they'll read this book and be inspired by the story and learn something new that they haven't. This is not a very well-known piece of history. And I did want to add that, even though this story does tackle a serious topic, we're talking about racial discrimination here and segregation, it's really accessible to young kids. And so, there's a few moments of levity sprinkled throughout it. And then for older kids and even adults, I think it's a good entry point, to this history, to just kind of encourage them maybe to learn a little bit more and dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. So it centers around Chinese immigration, but it's for everybody. And everybody should tune into this story, should tune into the discrimination it addresses, should tune into immigration stories, right? Because this is a country full of immigrants. Whether folks want to acknowledge that or not, it's truth. It's a fact, right? And that legacy of immigration is core to who we are as a nation. And so I want to talk about the opening line. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. How has Mamie Tape's story inspired you to take a single step in your own journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that because Mamie Tape really did inspire me on my journey to becoming an author. As you mentioned, I'm a former lawyer, and I learned about Mamie Tape when I was doing some research on Asian American civil rights cases. And I was really surprised. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, where all these events took place. And like Mamie, I'm the daughter of Chinese immigrants, but I had never heard this story. I did not know this history. And so it really stuck in me, how did I not know this? And, if I don't know it, a lot of other people might not know it. And so, but at that time I wasn't actually writing children's books. I was, I'd always actually wanted to write children's books ever since I was a kid myself. I've always loved writing, but, and I studied journalism in college, but then I went on to law school. I became a lawyer, but still in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, one day I'm going to write children's book, one day, one day, one day. But I was just this like dream. And so, but when the pandemic hit, I had this really an aha moment where, life is short and I should, maybe it was time to take that brave step and to follow my dream. So I started taking some writing classes, and it really brought me back to Mamie Tape and this story that had really stuck in me. And, it was during the big rise in anti-Asian hate. And so that also, really compelled me to want to tell this story.
The pandemic really pushed people to pivot. It's amazing all the different stories I've heard from folks in terms of switching careers or starting something new or picking up new hobbies or pursuing something that was in their mind, a dream or a passion. And so while the pandemic brought about some negatives, it certainly also brought about some positives, including pushing you to finally write your book. And in this day and age of book bans, did you feel any type of apprehension in writing a book that addresses racial discrimination?
Oh, yeah. and I still sometimes have a little apprehension, but that also gave me even more reason to write it. And I know you can relate to this. It's like, it's so important to teach kids truthful history, right? And this book is like my one small effort to contribute to that. And we can't let the people who are trying to censor us scare us into censoring ourselves, right? We need to keep telling our stories and doing whatever we can to make sure that they're heard.
Fear is a paralyzer. And I'm thank you for your honesty in terms of saying, like, yes, you did and sometimes do feel some apprehension, and yet still pushing forward. I think it's important for us to be honest about the emotions that we wrestle with when trying to navigate some of these tensions in our country. In this case, we're talking about racial tension, but nonetheless, the importance of persevering. And I'm wondering how you envision your book being utilized in learning spaces, because I can see how it can be utilized in a number of different ways, and I'm encouraged that you wrote this. But tell me what's on your mind in terms of how you envision it being utilized in different learning spaces.
Yeah, so I actually do have an educator's guide available for free on my website, and so it's a tool to help people engage in some deeper learning with the book and its themes. And kind of, you had kind of talked about this at the beginning, and it's not just like Asian American history, but this is really a part of our country's history,
That's
right?
right.
This
Our
is
history.
American history, right?
It's my
So,
history as much as it is yours.
right? Yeah, it's all of our history. And so it's a guide to really tackle that, of course, the wider themes, prejudice and racism, but also like courage and determination. And so it offers a lot of discussion questions to help engage kids in some, meaningful conversations. There's some activities that they can do, also ways to inspire them to be change makers too in their own lives. And a few touch points, about for further learning, like about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and a few cultural traditions. And then, of course, the long fight for school desegregation. So one thing I'm really hoping is that educators will use this book, not only to teach about Mamie's case, but to put it within the context of the long fight against school segregation, and teach it along stories of other young change makers. Like we have Roberto Alvarez, 1931. That was like, I believe, the first successful desegregation case. It was limited to a school district in San Diego, but, he was 12 years old, and of course, Sylvia Mendez, she desegregated schools in California, also 8 years old, like Mamie Tape. And Linda Brown, of course, Brown versus the Board of Education, right? 1954, desegregating schools nationwide. And like Ruby Bridges, right? 6 years old, even though schools had been, weren't allowed to be legally segregated, but they still weren't being integrated. And so, I really think it's important for kids to see that people of many different backgrounds have all been part of this long fight, and how it's really been a collective effort of so many people, and unfortunately over many, many years, but also to see that these are kids, that kids can be powerful change makers too.
Yeah, right. So you're not too young to be an advocate, and you're not too young to be an ally, and those are both themes that surface in your book also.
Absolutely.
There was quite a bit of research done prior to writing this book. Can you describe the research process and some of the most enlightening moments that you experienced?
Yeah, there was a lot of research. It's may surprise some people, right? It's like a picture book. It's like less than 1,000 words, but there's a lot that goes into that. And so I started with what I know, which is the legal research, right? Look, Mamie Tape's actual case, which was a California Supreme Court case, Tape v. Hurley, and then the legal documents filed in her case. I actually went to the California State Archives and was able to check out, the actual documents from 1885.
Wow,
Yeah, you
that's
have to
amazing.
you sit at this desk. You have to put all your belongings away. You're not allowed to have a pen or pencil because they don't want you to mess anything up. But that was really cool to these are the actual papers, right, that people actually filed. And there's also a recorded interview of Mamie Tape from 1972. And that's when she was 96 years old. So it was really close to actually before she passed away. So, her memories had faded a lot by then, but that was still a really great way to enrich the story. And I was also really lucky that I got to meet some of Mamie's relatives. She has her oldest great granddaughter who is up in Portland. And I met with her, and she had actually lived with Mamie for a time when she was growing up. But I'll say, one of the biggest sources of information actually came from newspapers. So this was like a widely reported case at the time, in 1884, 1885. And so there were a lot of newspaper articles, and even though, the Chinese Exclusion Act was 1882. So this is all during that time. So even though there was a lot of anti-Chinese bias in the reporting, but these were still the closest bits of information to what actually happened. And so something that really jumped out at me is how much of a one step forward, 2 steps back process this was, which I think, that is what we see, right, in these fights for justice, and so that's kind of something I really wanted to convey in the story. As far as a couple enlightening moments, like I said, this was during the pandemic, a lot of anti-Asian hate, and it was actually really surreal to read these papers from the 1880s and how closely they paralleled what was happening in real time. Even some of the words that were being used, about, telling Chinese people to go back to where they came from, and how they were spreading filth and disease. It was really depressing to see, okay, not that much has changed. But again, that kind of was a motivating factor too, of this is why we need to keep telling our stories. And then I'll say, from the Mamie Tape's interview, it was really cool to be able to hear her actual voice, even though she's 96 years old now. But the little bits of things she did share did help enrich the story, like I said. And also, you really could get the sense from her how much of an independent-minded person she really was. So I could kind of see how at 8 years old she would, have had that ability to do that, because not all of us could have. So
what an amazing opportunity to be able to connect with her, learn from her, hear from her directly. I wonder what surfaces for you when you hear the excerpt from your book. Before I could reach the door, the principal stopped me. Your kind is not welcome here.
Yeah, so that really brings me back to, all the moments in my life where I have felt unwelcome or out of place, because of how I look, and who I am. And the line of text that comes right after that is I felt like the ground had slipped out from under me, just like my first time roller skating. And that really comes back to, as I was writing this, and I really started, like, I would close my eyes and really think about, like, what was I feeling in those kinds of moments? And it's like, to me, it's like this disorienting, sorry, disorienting feeling of being somewhere where you think you belong. And then, but others are treating you differently, even though they may know nothing about you, or maybe sometimes it's even people you thought were your friends. Right. And as an adult, I think sadly, many of us come to expect that in some spaces. That's what we may encounter. But, like when you're a kid and that happens for the very first time, it's like your whole world is being flipped upside down. Right. And so that was kind of what I was trying to convey. When I was writing that, and sort of what comes up for me.
Well, let's stay there. Here's another
Mhm.
excerpt for you to react to. Later, I thought about all those years Chinese children couldn't go to school at all. Because of the steps I'd taken, there was now one public school where we were welcome. This time, no one could shut it down.
Yeah. So for me, that it kind of really goes to the heart of what I hope readers will take away from this book is, even though things didn't turn out quite, as expected, and even though change, positive change often comes very, very, very slowly,
Change is
especially,
gradual. Progress is
yeah,
gradual.
yeah, but every little step counts, so I think we need to keep taking those steps. We need to keep moving ourselves forward. And so I think, still having that pride in what she did accomplish, in that her steps did make a difference.
Absolutely. Talk to me about the illustrations in your book. What were some of the most significant elements you wanted your illustrator, Michelle Jing Chan, to capture?
Yeah. So, okay. So a funny thing about picture books in the world of traditional publishing is that the author and illustrator actually do not normally communicate with each other during the process. So the illustrator, as was the case in with my book, is hired by the publisher, and the illustrator works with an art director to decide the look and feel of the art, what scenes to depict, and then the author, me, works with an editor to really focus on the text and any changes we want to make there. And so that is how this book and the art was done. But I will say that because of the historic aspect, and because I love research, I tend to go down maybe a little more than I need to sometimes. But I did put together a very thick document of visual research. And so it had all kinds of descriptions of different things, old photos. So just of all, as what was happening in the story. And so that is a way I did contribute, and that really helped with the historical accuracy. So, once sketches were finalized, I did get to see those and provide some comments. But again, my feedback was mostly related to the historic details.
Okay, wonderful. So in the author's note, you mentioned a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step and originates from a Chinese proverb, most commonly attributed to the philosopher Lao Tzu. I don't know if I pronounced that the right way.
Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu.
Yeah, great.
Between the 4th and 5th centuries BCE. So as it relates and thinking about Mamie's journey, but that of countless others, as stated here in your quote, right? You say, to me, it pointedly sums up not only Mamie's journey, but that of countless others who have fought and continue to fight for equality. As it relates to equality, what fight is on your heart and mind these days?
Well, I think even though a lot of progress has been made, really the fight for equality in education here in the United States is still ongoing. There's no legally mandated school segregation, but there's still a lot of geographic segregation, and that's resulted in a lot of inequities in terms of school funding, the quality of education, right? And based on different socioeconomic demographics. And so there's still so many gaps. And of course, right? I mean, this is like the work you guys are doing too, right? Is that there's not enough representation of the full spectrum of histories and cultures that are part of our country. So despite the pushback in a lot of places and, like book bans that we were kind of mentioning, I will say I am glad to see that in some places, we are beginning to see the inclusion of more BIPOC histories, right? African American history, AAPI history, and so I'm very encouraged that we're seeing that in some places, and that again, step by step, right? Change is happening, and so I'm happy that that my book is like a one little thing that can help fill some of that gap too, right? Like bring Mamie Tape's story, be another contributor to a wider audience, and as a teaching tool to get these stories out there.
Thank you for sharing that. If you had an opportunity to have lunch with anybody dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, well, maybe it's not surprising, but I'd love to have lunch with Mamie Tape. I'd want to ask her all the questions. I'd have to write another book probably. Just find out really what was going through her mind. Get a little bit more into what that experience was like, and how that kind of influenced her in her later life. What having gone through that experience. So.
And so as we prepare to wrap up, what's the message of encouragement that you want to offer to our audience?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of relating back to themes we've talked about, but, I'd say like whatever hurdles and setbacks you might experience in your life, whether it's related to something really big, like you're fighting for a cause, or something small, like you're just trying to get through your day to day, keep moving forward. I'd say, be brave, keep taking those small steps, because that's what it is, step by step.
Anything that you want to share that's on the horizon for you, workshops or publications? Ding, ding, ding. I think you have something on the way.
Yes. Well, the book we've been talking about here, Mamie Tape Fights to Go to School, will be available beginning May 7th, available wherever books are sold. And I hope you will go grab yourself a copy. Check it out of your library. And if you don't find it at your library, please request it. Yeah. So thank you so much.
And who's the publisher?
This is Crown Books for Young Readers.
There you have it, folks. Go check it out. Please look up Traci. You could follow her on Instagram at Traci Huahn. Go to the website, tracihuahn.com, and purchase the book. All right. Mamie Tape Fights to Go to School. Get it into the schools. Share it with children, share it in different learning spaces, and let's keep the dialogue going. Traci, it's been wonderful to have you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for utilizing your voice, your research, and your writing to address racial discrimination, something that sometimes make people uncomfortable, right? But important, extremely important that we wrestle with that discomfort, that we push and fight the resistance to address these type of issues, and that we do it as a united front, because your history is my history. It is our history. It's a shared history. Let's embrace it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for all the important work that you're doing.
As always, your engagement in our classroom is greatly appreciated. Be sure to subscribe, rate the show, and write a review. Finally, for resources to help you understand the intersection of race, bias, education, and society, go to multiculturalclassroom.com. Peace and love from your host, Roberto Germán.